I found myself noticing businesses and wondering, what do they do behind those doors? It did not take long before my curiosity got the best of me, and I began making phone calls. And I have been organizing field trips ever since. Some of those adventures have been just for our family, some have included a few friends, but most have been for my homeschool group that has over 150 families. We've done museums, zoos, and historical places, although by far our favorite field trips were those obscure, off the beaten path, family owned businesses who were passionate about what they do. Hello, my name is Beth Mellott, and I will be speaking to you about planning successful field trips. My husband and I have homeschooled for 23 years. That's 3 children from pre K through graduation. We've done museums, zoos, and historical places, although by far our favorite field trips were those obscure, off the beaten path, family owned businesses who were passionate about what they do. Now, maybe you're thinking, yeah, field trips are easy to do with elementary students, but my children are older now, so this doesn't apply to me. I totally get where you're coming from, but give me just a few more minutes of your time. I believe I can help you, even with high school students. I agree it gets more complicated to incorporate field trips into your day as your students get older, just because the bookwork is more intense. But please don't let that stop you. Your older students need a break just as much, if not more, than your littles. I understand setting up a field trip can seem intimidating, and often the hardest part is figuring out where to go. So, I would like to share some tips for finding field trips that will enhance your homeschool. Let's be honest, some field trips are just for fun, and I do not want to dissuade you from including those into your schedule. Everyone needs a mental break every now and again. But I believe field trips can contribute so much more to your homeschool than merely fun. There are many benefits to adding field trips into your school day, including a well deserved break for you. But the top 3 benefits for your students are: number one, field trips will add depth to your homeschool in a way that bookwork never will. Ask for a behind the scenes tour of a police station, a fire station, a post office, a grocery store, or even a bowling alley. Each of these will teach your child about their world and how it works. These kinds of field trips are perfect for younger children, but with a little more effort on your part, you can easily adapt them to your older students as well. Ask your tour guide questions like, what kind of education is needed to do your job? Or what kind of work schedule does this job require? Benefit number 2, field trips can spark or even deepen an interest. This can occur with any age student. When our daughter was in elementary school, she was fascinated with horses to the point where I had to limit the number of times she begged for a horse each day. In desperation, I contacted a local horse farm and asked if we could visit, and if they would teach my daughter how to properly clean a stall. I was certain she would be grossed out and the pleading for a horse of her own would end. Needless to say, my plan backfired. She loved every minute of that field trip, and within a few short years, we had 2 horses of our own, and she never once complained about mucking out the stalls. Benefit number 3, field trips can also enhance a subject you are studying by expounding on the bookwork and showing it in a practical way. And here is where field trips will really help your older student. Think of the bookwork as the theory of a subject. Theory only goes so far, especially with the hands-on student. Field trips take that theory and make it practical. For example, learning about forensics was interesting for my hands-on learner, but it became fascinating when we spoke to some state police officers from the forensic science unit and watched them actually lift fingerprints and use their facial recognition software. Then a trip to the local coroner was the icing on the cake, as they saw real-life objects that had previously only been props on TV. Crime scene tape, body bags, evidence markers, and best of all, the body cooler, which was empty for anyone who's wondering. There are three important steps to take when setting up a successful field trip. The first step is brainstorming. What are you studying and what do you want your child to learn? Will you be studying the elections this coming year? How about a trip to your local senator or representative, especially if they are up for re-election? You can learn what all it takes to run a campaign. Or you could take a trip to your state capitol or local county courthouse, see a courtroom, and learn about all the various jobs it takes to make your state or county function. Or perhaps talk to your local election officials or poll workers and find out how they spent election day. Will your science include botany, the study of plants and trees? Then ask yourself if there are any agriculture or industry specific to your area, such as orchards, farming, or maple syrup making. If not, what about touring a business that works with the end products, such as a flower shop or a paper mill? Will your science include biology, the study of living things? Maybe a trip to the zoo, a local dairy farm, or even a butterfly house will be the ticket. What about music or art? If you are studying Impressionism, for example, tour an art gallery that's featuring that style and then have your child try their hand at it. Or attend a concert. Most colleges host concerts open to the public featuring their music majors. And how about your history curriculum? Will you be studying a time period that coincides with the area in which you live? If so, then by all means take advantage of that. It's okay to put the textbooks down for a time and focus on learning your local history. However, if that's not the case, don't fret. Just come at it from a different angle. Think about some crafts that have been handed down over the years. Blacksmithing was a trade for generations. Does that fit into your history time period? What about weaving or quilting or coopering? When we were studying the Middle Ages in cathedrals, we visited a small local business that makes stained glass windows, and that was just fascinating. But we're studying ancient history, you say. So how do I find a field trip for that? Well, I agree that one's a little more challenging, especially if traveling the globe is a financial impossibility. But let's see what happens if we modify our definition of field trip just a little bit. Instead of thinking of a field trip as someplace we have to go to, what if we think of a field trip as a break from the bookwork? For example, when our children were in early to middle elementary school, we were studying creation, the Ice Age, and cavemen. On a whim, I contacted a local appliance company and asked if they could save me 2 large boxes. They gave us 2 enormous refrigerator boxes, and our kids spent weeks creating their own caves in our basement. They took days to do their cave drawings and even signed them with their handprints. They went outside and brought in sticks and rocks to make campfires, cutting out construction paper flames and stringing up meat over the fire. They gathered pine branches to make beds, and when they had their caves complete, they begged to spend a night sleeping in them. Of course, that adventure only lasted a few hours before they longed for the comfort of their own beds, but it was definitely a break from the bookwork. Now that you have a few ideas, the second step for a successful field trip is contact. This is the most challenging part for introverts, but trust me, once you realize how willing people are to share their business and their passion with your children, the contacting becomes much less intimidating. It is perfectly fine to contact a business via email. And for us introverts, that often seems the best way. Just keep in mind that it is much more difficult for a person to say no to you when you're on the other end of the phone. When making contact, remember that not everyone who answers the phone has the authority to say yes. So don't get discouraged by the "I'll have to get back to you" line. Simply make yourself a note to contact them once more in about a week with a friendly reminder. Typically, if I do not hear back after a second contact, I usually take that as a no. If a business does say yes, after you celebrate for a moment, you will want to have a list of questions ready. Over the years, I discovered that I was asking the same basic questions from all the businesses I would contact. So I made myself a cheat sheet, and that way I didn't forget a question and have to call the business back and pester them. I've taken these 3 pages of questions along with some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years and put them all together into one downloadable PDF so it can be reprinted as often as you need. The third step for a successful field trip is preparation. If possible, schedule the field trip close to the time when you will be studying the subject. The actual date, of course, will depend on the business and when it best fits into their schedule. Usually, your business contact will ask when you wish to come, so it helps to have 2 or 3 dates in mind. Most often, I schedule field trips in the middle or at the end of whatever topic we were studying. Remember, we're going to think of the bookwork as the theory and the field trip as the practical application. So your children get much more out of a field trip if they have some background information upon which to hang or connect the experience. You will also want to make the initial contact at least a month before your suggested dates to give the business time to prepare for your visit. This one I can't stress enough. No one likes a last-minute surprise, especially when you have a quota to meet. So give the business as much advanced notice as you possibly can. Then give yourself ample travel time. It is far better for your family to wait for the business than for the business to have to wait for your family. And have a few questions in mind. Most tours end with a Q&A time, and not all children are willing to step up and ask the first question. So if you have a question or two in your back pocket, you can break the ice for your child and get the dialogue going. So how do you get started? I'm glad you asked. Your first step should be deciding on how many field trips you want to do. I found that for our family anyway, it worked best to do between 1 and 4 field trips each month. In general, the older the student, the fewer the field trips. But like anything else in homeschooling, this does not have to be a hard and fast rule, just a generalization to help keep you on track. After all, once you get the hang of making contact, you may not want to stop. Once you have an idea of how many field trips you want to take, start making a list of the general topics you plan to cover this coming year and prioritize them. But don't forget the old adage, all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. So be sure to throw in a few just for fun field trips. Your children will thank you. Hopefully by now, you see that setting up your own field trips is not nearly as intimidating as it seems. And to help you even more, I have a few resources that may interest you. My husband and I own homeschoollegacy.com, where we sell downloadable PDFs focusing on unit studies, language arts, and, of course, field trips. You're welcome to download our free 5 tips to planning field trips. This resource, however, is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as organizing a field trip goes. If you are from the Central PA area, we have another resource all ready for you. No reinventing the wheel necessary here. It is the Ultimate Central PA Field Trip Guide, a 68-page resource with over 170 field trip ideas spanning 14 counties in Central PA. Our family has personally been to 80% of these businesses. This resource contains the business address, contact information, a brief description of what you will see and do, the length of the tour, any age restrictions, and general pricing info. If you are unfortunate enough to live elsewhere, well, we have a resource for you too. It is Tips and Tricks to Successful Field Trip Adventures. It was created to be reusable and to help you cover all your bases and capture all pertinent information in one phone call to a business. It contains 10 tips, 4 tricks, 3 pages of questions, and 1 student review. All these resources and many more are on our website, homeschoollegacy.com. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me to learn about planning field trips. God bless.